Welcome to the Maria Heller Show, the Internet's original podcast. Since the year 2000, always ahead of the curve, always on your side. A true warrior for truth and justice, Maria and her guests leave nothing out, and no one is off limits. There is only one truth, the rest is lies. Sit back, enjoy the education with a true daughter of Mother Earth. Sharp New York wit, spiritual knowing, and a very dry sense of humor, Maria will dissect the news and lies to make it all palatable. Education is power. Maria delivers rapid-fire truth like no one else can. Here she is, the mouth that roars, the legendary Meria Heller. Good morning, world. Maria here, alive and kicking. Welcome to a breather, a wonderful spiritual breather today from this false reality that we're all trapped in. The Bigger Picture with Michael Reccia. If you're not familiar with his work, get over to josephspeaks.com. I can't tell you how many people I have turned on to his work and are so happy to have found it. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Maria. Great to be back with you.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, I think.
Yeah, you
in the light
think?
of the crazy world we've been talking about earlier.
I know, the world gets crazier by the minute, and I know over there in the UK you got a lot of your own craziness happening, from Manchester to the fires going on, and here we've got, shootings and mentally deranged people, and it just, there's so much fear and anxiety on this planet right now that I thought it's time to really address that. And I had posted this morning that you were going to be on the show and that it was going to be a spiritual show, which would be a breather. And of course, somebody said, well, we live in this reality, and, kind of poo-pooing spirituality when I said, but spirituality is all we have to stay in balance on this planet.
Yes, and we live in this reality because we've created this reality. If we don't like this reality, we need to create something different. And we do that not by approaching this reality on the level of this reality, but approaching it from within, from our core, and changing things from our core. Everything has to change spiritually. You take away the spiritual equation and look at the world we've got.
Absolutely. And after, I try not to argue with people when I'm, on social media because it takes up so much of my time.
Yes,
but I just decided to put up a quote by Martin Luther King that he made in 1967. And it's kind of appropriate to what we're going to talk about today. He said, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And you look at this world today, and, I would say that it's the absence of the sacred that has thrown so many people off kilter. It
is. We've excluded God. If I'm giving a lecture or an address, it's great if I'm addressing spiritually minded people, but you'd be surprised how many people at the mention of the G word, in fact, I wrote a blog about, my goodness, did Michael mention the G word? Which seems to be the greatest profanity you can exclaim in the minds of many people. We have lost our godliness. We have lost our source. Our source is still there, but we don't acknowledge the divine in anything.
Wow.
And so we chase after the divine in substitutes, in riches, in prestige, in power, in celebrity, and none of those things can ever, ever, ever bring us happiness.
Right.
We've excluded what we are. It's not that we've just pushed out God from our mental field. We've pushed out ourselves, because at core we are God. We are each a part of the divine and each a part of each other, and we're not acknowledging that. And that's why the world's going worse and worse and worse. And that's why we have to fight harder and harder and harder to put light back into it, to re-establish an acknowledgement of God in people. To re-establish an acknowledgement that that's where we come from, that's where we're going to, and that this is indeed an illusion. But it's an illusion that we polluted by excluding knowledge of the divine.
Right. Well, I think that the mention of the word God is offensive today because religion has made it offensive. And if you remember when you and I first started doing this show, we went into an explanation of what you mean by God so that
Yes.
people wouldn't be offended thinking that we're talking about some white-haired man floating around on a cloud with a harp.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed.
but when, I think about, certain rock stars, you can go back to, John Lennon, so many different people when they say, that, we are God. Oh, right away, that's blasphemy. That's heresy.
Yeah.
So we've been so beaten away from our own divine nature and people understanding that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience that I can
Yes.
understand that anything that smacks of religion is a turnoff.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But we also don't acknowledge that not only are we a part of each other, but at core, we're all the same thing. And that this field of illusion that we live in is also part of the divine. It's shaped by our own thoughts, but it's part of the divine. And if we put God back into the equation, then that landscape around us responds to our thoughts because we acknowledge that we are creative, angelic beings. But we've forgotten all this. We are so rooted in materialism, so rooted in this being all there is, and so rooted in preserving the body at all costs, preserving the physical at all costs, preserving appearance at all costs. And it's our spiritual appearance that matters. It's what we are inside that matters. And we've forgotten this. And it's frightening. But light, the transmission of light by those who do remember who they are, actually changes that landscape, actually infuses that landscape with enough power for those who have mistakenly avoided and turned their back on the divine within to re-examine their stance and to
Right.
think, there's more than this.
Right. So we're
I
not. So
am
we're
more
not.
than this.
Right. We're not talking about losing faith in a god. All right. I think at
Yeah.
last count there's 4,000 gods worshipped on this planet. But
Yes.
we've lost sight of the fact that we are indeed God. We are creators. I remind people that you are creating your life every morning when you wake up. You're creating a whole new day for yourself.
Yes, our thoughts are alive. Our thoughts take form around us, and what we invest belief into and conviction into manifests around us. And so you can see that it's very important that we do not anchor our thoughts in the negativity and the violence of today around the world. We have to say, well, that's all right, Kay, for you. That's fine. I don't judge you for that. But my stance is different. My stance is that the world is peaceful. My stance is that the world is light-filled. My stance is that I and others like me can make a difference because we are connected to the divine and we acknowledge that. And that's how we start to change things. We can't change things. We've said this on the show for years, Maria, haven't we? You cannot change things materially.
Right.
You are putting a Band-Aid onto a wound. You are not addressing what caused the wound in the first place. You have to address what caused the wound in the first place. And what you see around you is the coalesced thoughts of mankind for millennia. And you have to go back and back and back and discover that you have this God core within you and change your outlook. See the world that you want. I mean, each of the people listening to this show tonight will want, hopefully, a better world. Well, wanting it is not enough. You have to see it. You have to sit down in the morning or in an evening. You have to connect to the God within, and you have to visualize every aspect of that better world that you want. You have to see harmony. You have to see a reinstatement of the divine within all things. You have to see people harmonizing with each other. You have to see an end to war, an end to famine, an end to weapons. You have to create that better world. That's the only way it will ever, ever, ever change. If it doesn't, we are heading towards the end of a cycle, and then we'll repeat ourselves. We're like a record stuck in the groove, and round and round and round we go until we play something different. And the
Exactly.
something different we have to play is an acknowledgement of what we really are. It's not just that we don't acknowledge God. We don't acknowledge that we are anything more than this flesh. We think that what we see when we look in the mirror is us. It's such a small portion of what we are.
Right.
It's such a small representation of what we are. It's only a suit of clothes that allows us to experience this plane for a very, very short time. But we've invested all our energies into it, and we believe that's us. Materialism is us. We are flesh and blood and nothing more. Gosh, what a shock for people when they awake on the other side, Maria.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm sure of that. I'm sure of that. But I often think about your book, Your Life After Death, which, even though I got to tell you, I love all your books, that one's still my favorite, Michael.
Thank you.
I have explained this to so many of my clients, so many of my students, that everything you do here in this reality helps determine where you're allowed to go after this.
Yes.
And I remember that one page where you say, guess what? If you're a couch potato in this lifetime, you're going to wake up in a room with a whole bunch of other couch potatoes. And I don't want that for myself. So I have been stressing with a lot of people to keep that in mind, and also to never come back here. It's interesting because I have a very dear friend. She's one of my Reiki masters, one of my best students, and she's in process of leaving the planet. Now, I have to tell you, because of her spirituality, she has no fear whatsoever. She's anxious to go. She has led a beautiful life of light and love. Everyone she's ever met has been touched in a positive way. So I had a long conversation with her on the phone, and of course I told her I would send her Reiki to help her transition. And I repeated to her, remember this. I said, the last few words you have to remember on your exit is never come back.
Yeah.
And she was very grateful. What I'm noticing is a lot of people are dying, and they're dying quite quickly these days. It's like unexpected deaths. And another man, that I knew only from my gym, he was 83 years old. He lived an ordinary life, but he lived it extraordinarily because everyone he touched was touched in a great way. There were 400 people at his memorial, and every one of them said he was the nicest man they ever met in their life. Now, he wasn't a spiritual teacher. He wasn't a guru. He wasn't an author. He wasn't, an activist. He just was a beautiful soul that shined that beauty and love to everyone.
Yeah.
So to me, he was a spiritual master.
Absolutely. That's something else. There's a very important statement there, isn't there? That you never know who you're talking to. We look down to people. We exclude people. We think that people aren't as intelligent as us or haven't acquired as much material as we have, and therefore they are inferior to us. We never know who we're talking to. Mm-hmm. We never know how many times that soul has incarnated. We never know what their purpose is in being here. We never know what they are teaching the people around them. And so it's a very good idea to treat everyone with equal respect and with equal love, because we don't know who we're addressing.
Exactly. Well, a lot of times angels show up in the weirdest places, and a lot of times they're homeless people that people just don't even see on the streets.
Yes.
But, you never know when you're, what I like to call, it's a little corny, when you're being touched by an angel.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. We are, at core, all angels. We are all angelic beings, and it goes back to the fall that we've discussed at length in other shows. But not many of us realize that. But you do come across certain wonderful, wonderful souls. Perhaps you sit next to someone on a bus, and they just look at you, and you feel wonderful. There's such an influx of energy. You feel enlightened. You feel that here is such a sweet soul. My day has changed completely. And as you say, there are undercover angels quietly going about their business to make people's lives more harmonious, to put them back in touch with their divine core. And so we should treat everyone with respect. Absolutely. We should treat all life with respect, because everything is alive, not just the animal kingdom and the flora and fauna, but everything that we can see is alive, because it's constructed of spiritual molecules. Again, we're back to the illusion. Right. Beneath the illusion. There is a live matrix that we have put in place. And that's why we're able to change it. We can change those molecules because our thoughts go out from us and rearrange what is around us into the reality that we want to perceive. And you'll say, many people will say, well, I can't do anything, little me. Well, first of all, it's not little you.
Right.
It's not little you. You are an angelic being. But if you as an angelic being join with another angelic being and another angelic being and another angelic being, then the darkness goes away because there is so much light, it has nowhere to go. And that's what we're aiming for. That's what we're working towards. And yes, these are tough times, but they are times where we need to dig in and work harder, bring out more light, send out more light, see the world changing, see the harmony in everyone, see them being peaceful, see the violence being chased away, see the darkness being chased away and replaced with light. And it will happen if we do it. But again, as we've said on many shows, you've got to do something. You have to do something.
Right.
It's not up to everyone else. It's up to each of us to do it.
Right, and it doesn't have to be anything huge. I remember, John Lennon said that if you want peace, it can be as simple as putting a sign in your window saying peace.
Absolutely.
And, anybody that's
that
right, and anybody that sees that is going to, it filters through to their subconscious.
Yes.
And, for everybody listening, I've done a few spiritual shows last week, and I'm moving more in that direction now, Michael, because
great.
Listen, it's the only real important things I can give people. Sure, I can give them the news and whatnot, but on a spiritual level and for our soul's sake, it's more important. So talking to you, I was rereading some of From Here to Infinity this morning. And you talk about pretty much what I would call making your home a sanctuary, a sacred space. That's a good way for people to start out. Clear the energy in your own home. Be careful who and what you allow in your space. Let it radiate, let it radiate light.
Yes, and realize that you imbue the objects in your home with your personality, with your dominant traits. So if you are part of a home where there's a lot of arguing going on, then that negative vibration, the negative vibrations from those arguments are soaked up, as it were, by your furniture, by your walls, by your carpets, by every object in your house. Mm-hmm. And if you feel that your house is negative, then you have to put positivity into it. A house is like a tape recorder. That ages me, Maria, doesn't it? A house is like a digital recorder, I should say. And it absorbs the dominant vibrations in it. As you've said quite rightly, you have to be careful who you let into your house. And if you feel that someone has disturbed the vibration in your house, then you have to cleanse your house when they've gone from you.
Right.
Yes, to sit each day and to see light in your house, to see a protection of light around your house, to invite into your house the God within. Not any specific personality from the spirit realms, because you have to make absolutely sure that those visitors are who they say they are.
Right.
But you invite the God within in first, and all else follows.
Right.
If you are psychic enough to see spirit people, mm-hmm. then having invited the God within in, the spirit people that will then come to you are of the right vibration, and you can trust them.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I've always been very protective of my home and who enters and who doesn't. But I remember back in the day, if it was my in-laws, which I used to call the outlaws, I'd be smudging my house as soon as they left. Like doing all kinds of rituals to get their energy out of my space. But now we're talking about a house, and there are many techniques you can do. Some of what Michael said. You can smudge your house. You can visualize a wheel around your house. But I had this conversation just last night with a man I know. And he was talking about relationships, and he has problems with relationships and blah, blah, blah. And one thing led to the other, and I said to him, well, if you're only looking for the physical and the sex act with another person, you're not going to have a relationship, especially if you're spiritually evolved. You need, water has to rise to its own level. But I also instructed him, you know how this world always tells you, Michael, that if you have sex with somebody, or you're having sex with everybody they ever had sex with, you can get this disease and that. But I
Yeah.
said to him, your bedroom is your most sacred space
Yes.
because that's where spirit talks to you. That's where the dreaming time happens.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I have always felt that the most dangerous thing that you can contract from someone else is by sharing their auric field. You can pick up all their negativity, their fears, their nightmares, etc. And I
Yes.
think that's even more dangerous. So I said, look, if you just want to have one night stands, go to a cheap motel. You know what I mean? Leave that energy there.
You've touched on something very important there, haven't you, Maria? Because we don't realize that there are entities or spirit connections to the people that we know. And those spirit connections are similar to the vibrations that the people we know give out. In other words, if someone is a violent person, then they will attract violent people from the lower levels of the spiritual realms. You talk of a cheap motel. We've been in several hotels that weren't cheap, and have come up against some appalling residual spiritual contacts there. Because, of course, all kinds of people pass through hotel rooms, and they're never cleansed.
Right.
They change the sheets, but they don't change the vibration. And so we've got to be very, very careful. And if we feel, if our sort of psychic antenna tell us that there is something wrong with a person, we're not judging them. We are simply acknowledging that their vibration and our vibration, for whatever reason, isn't harmonious. They don't fit together well. And we should always take notice of those signals. If we feel uncomfortable with somebody, it's because there is something causing us to feel uncomfortable
Right.
on a spiritual level.
Right. They're not
So
out.
if
They're
we're
not
in
up to
company
the
of something
same.
like that,
Right.
we need to surround them with light. We need to surround ourselves with light, and we need to make sure when they've gone out of the door that we haven't picked anything up from them, as you say,
Right.
anything spiritually that is negative.
All right. Well, I know you're probably going to travel some more, and I'm sure everybody's listening now saying, uh-oh, what do I do when I go to a hotel or motel? The first thing I do when I check into a room is I clear the space. I do specific Reiki rituals to clear the space of anybody else's energy. I don't
Yes.
just take for granted it looks clean, it is clean.
Yes, indeed.
So, there are techniques people can learn. They're simple techniques. And even if it's just putting a conscious thought and seeing light all around the room.
Yes.
Because you never know what's left behind. And listen, if somebody's not vibrating to your frequency, you don't have to hate them, but you don't have to keep them in your space.
That's the key. You don't have to like everybody to love everybody. And a lot of people think that's a very strange phrase. But it isn't. You're here to love everyone because they're each a part of you. But you don't have to like them.
Right.
Doesn't mean you have to dislike them, as you say, or hate them. But you don't have to like them. But you can still send out your love to them. Wish them well. Wish them spiritual evolution. Wish them enough light to see things in a different manner. And then walk in the opposite direction.
Right. I had the reverse of that, actually. When my kids were little and they used to do some dastardly deed as part of their punishment, whatever it was. But I would always say to them, I don't like what you did, but I still love you.
Indeed.
So I totally understand that you don't have to like everyone to love them. But, I don't understand people that keep that irritant in their lives, knowing that it's destructive for them.
Yes, I think it's a power-seeking thing, isn't it, Maria? I think a lot of people feel, again, because of lack of God in their lives and lack of acknowledgement of the divinity within, that they need power. They need to be superior. They need energy. And the way that they express that is by disrupting the lives around them so that they feel that they are top dog.
Right.
It all goes back to the theme of us not acknowledging what we really are.
Right.
If we acknowledge at our core that we are part of divinity, then what power could we possibly want here? We have all power.
Right.
We have all creativity. What could we possibly want? But we've created a world of want, a world of lack, a world of competitiveness. And so we're always, or many people are always seeking to be top dog, to be superior, and reinforcing to themselves that feeling of being superior, which is worthless. In the spiritual
Exactly.
realms, is absolutely worthless. Fame is worthless. Superiority doesn't mean a thing. You are equal to everyone else. The only thing that means a thing is where have you landed yourself because of the vibrationary rate of your soul, which you have elevated or left on a low level whilst you are on earth. We said at the beginning that you can only go to a level that is in harmony with the vibration of your soul. And you elevate your soul by the way in which you treat others and the way in which you treat this world and the way in which you treat yourself. And, you can't take a pot of money with you and say, look, I'll just slip you these notes when I
Right.
go to a higher plane. No. And it's not a judgment. It is simply a mechanic of the way that the spiritual realms work, in that you come up against a barrier that you can only get through by elevating your soul. And you elevate your soul by working out of yourself those things that have kept you on a negative level whilst on earth. So you have to consider, if you don't come back, you move forwards, and you haven't got these things out of your soul, you've got to consider how you treated people. You've got to consider how you treated yourself. You've got to realize that there is a spiritual way to approach things and a materialistic and an earthly way to approach things.
Right.
And in realizing that and examining some of the challenges that have come to you that perhaps you've tackled in a negative way, you elevate your vibration. You elevate it through harmony. You elevate it through loving people. You help elevate it through respecting and appreciating people and respecting and appreciating all aspects of creation. Thing is, it's better to do it here whilst we're here than do it there.
Right. Well, when you talk about loving and respecting everything and everything is alive, I think about animals.
Yes.
And, most people, everybody wants to talk to aliens. Aliens should land. Well, when you look at some of these animals, they're pretty alien to the human race, okay? But people don't seem to have any problem trapping them, hunting them, fishing them, eating them, torturing them. And yet, in your book, you say that it's actually easier for animals to cross over than it is for humans.
It is, because they don't have any of our preconceived ideas as to what comes next. And animals, yes, animals are violent towards each other, but they're violent towards each other because of the effects of the fall. Prior to the fall, animals didn't eat each other. And I include us in that. We didn't eat animal flesh. And one of the astounding things, and I'm sure you've seen visions like this on the spiritual side of life, is that you come across these wondrous, wondrous animal souls living with human souls, living with angelic souls. And they are magnificent. I have seen, for example, a lion, a wonderful, wonderful lion on the spiritual side of life. And the lion doesn't move his lips as though, he's been CGI'd, but he does talk to you. Mm-hmm. I've had an eagle brought in the past that perched on my arm, came in with a guide. I've seen tigers go through rooms. Wonderful, wonderful animals. And you look at them with spiritual eyes and you think, you are just wonderful, you are beautiful, you are gorgeous. How can anyone harm you? And we shouldn't be harming animal life. Animal life is part of the background of diva creation that gives us our backdrop against which we experience. And animal life is as we are, part of if you like, a hive mentality, but also there are the individuals within that hive mentality. So the lion can be part of the diva, and the diva acknowledges that, but the lion can also be individual and acknowledge that it's part of the diva. It's a wonderful, wonderful backdrop, and we shouldn't harm it. We shouldn't harm the trees. We shouldn't harm the planet. The planet is alive. The planet is a spirit. And it's this blindness that we have, the same blindness that excludes the divinity within. It excludes all other forms of life and says, we are superior. If we're so superior, why are we making such a mess of things?
Right, why we're killing each other every day.
Yes.
They say animals are dumb, but I remember some bears saying that the two-legged was the most dangerous animal on the planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've talked about it before. We've talked about consuming animal flesh and the problems of that. And I know it doesn't sit well with a lot of people, but it is time for us to stop eating animals. And purely from the practical point of view, if listeners can't change from a spiritual point of view, can't latch onto that concept of everything being a part of us and everything needing respect, then purely from a material, from a physical point of view, if we eat animal flesh, the animal flesh at the point of execution, because that's what it is instilled with the terror of the execution and the violence of the execution. We are all spiritual beings, and so we consume that flesh, and living within us, sitting within us, degrading for days, because it takes days to pass through, for meat to pass through the human system, is that terror.
Right. Well, you're eating
And
the
also,
energy. Right. You're eating the energy of their terrible
yes,
lives, their abuse, their rape, their torture, their slaughter, their fear.
yes,
And
you're taking
years
that
ago when
into
people...
your body.
Sorry, Michael, what?
Sorry, Maria, I missed that. Sorry.
I said, years ago, I made all the same excuses everybody else does until I got educated. And I always thought I was a very, strong spiritual person with a pretty clear connection to spirit. And
Yeah.
then I realized once I had stopped eating animal flesh that my gift got even clearer and stronger. And I became more peaceful.
Yes.
And it was my
That
daughter
was
that
really.
recognized it. She said to me, she says, Mom, what happened to you? You're not fun to fight with anymore. You know how we Italians are. And I had to think about that for a while. And then I realized that I was eating peace.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
everything is energy, everything is a frequency. And I'm not preaching to people out there. I mean, everything is your own choice. But I certainly noticed a huge difference in myself.
I was
Michael.
told in order to do what I do that I needed to stop eating meat. And I was 30 at the time, a long, long time ago. And every so often I would be eating meat, and I would suddenly, it would be impressed on me what I was actually eating, that it was flesh. And from being a meat eater, I couldn't eat meat. And then I'd be okay for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the same thing would happen again
Right.
until I had to stop. And it was necessary for my own spiritual development, but it was necessary for my mediumship as well, as you've just said. The higher vibrations, to stimulate the higher vibrations, not to be pulled down by the heavy vibration of having flesh inside me. And it's shocking to me to see on the TV cuts of meat or butcher shops,
Right.
because it looks like you're looking at amputated limbs once you've trodden this path.
Right.
It's shocking to think that people don't associate what they're buying with what it actually is.
Well,
And
because they
also
don't call it
shocking
that. They don't call it that. It's either
no,
beef or pork. They don't call it pig or cow. I think that would
no,
make a difference. The other day I was in Costco with one of my girlfriends, and I never go by the meat cases, but we found ourselves there, and I looked in that case, and I put my hand out and turned my face to shield myself from the horror I was seeing in there. And of course, she noticed it, but I was like, oh my God, who's feeding that to their family? And
yes,
it was that foreign to me now. But of course, I'm not judging anybody listening. I mean, it's a process. You have to unlearn what you've been taught is supposedly healthy for you. It's supposedly good for you. But what people don't understand is the density of eating flesh locks you into this reality, makes it
yes, it
harder
pulls
for
you
your
in.
spiritual growth to happen because you
Yeah,
do get locked in. Think about it. I remember one famous vegan had said that his body was not a graveyard. Uh, you know, and that was something to think about. Michael, we need to take a short break. Hold on, Michael and I will be right back. Hi, this is Maria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to Meria.net, Meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you and help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.